Yuma, which means hello in the Ngunnawal language. Janyimaba, David, thank you for your beautiful rendition of the didgeridoo, the Yidaki. As always, an absolute pleasure. Can we give him another round of applause, please? Yuma Yadong Gadba Danga Galanga Garalinya, and I have just introduced to you myself, Caroline Hughes, one of many Ngunnawal elders that have the cultural responsibility and privilege to provide ceremonial practices on our lands. I stand here today with Alana Harris, another Ngunnawal elder, and acknowledge my Ngunnawal people sitting at a table here today. In the spirit of wellbeing and coming together, Narraganawali, we'd like to acknowledge those members of the stolen generations from across the many nations that are here with us today. We share your pain, we share your love for our people, and understand that this breakfast is an important lest we forget for our people. And in saying that, I'd like to also pay respect to our neighbours, the Ngunnawal neighbours, the Wiradjuri, the Ngarigo, Yuin and Gundungurra people. Your Honourable Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, Senators, Ministers and Members of Government. Michael McLeod, what a great man you are. Can we please give Michael a round of applause? Michael, you have not let this opportunity go by that we remember each year. And from my heart to yours, Janyimaba, thank you. I stand here today as a child of a woman that was taken at 10 years of age at Yass. Her family lived on Hollywood Mission. Her and her sister, 11 years old, removed from their family, not because there were issues of child protection that needed to happen. After all, they came from a beautiful, beautiful family that were formed with a lot of love. So much love that my grandparents, Ferdy Bell and Ivy Brown, when they had their 14 children, they named them 11 girls with L and the boys with R. And it stood for love and romance. Isn't that beautiful? And yet, 2 of their daughters were removed because of the colour of their skin and to expunge their very Aboriginality from them. And we know the impacts that that has, not just for them, which is of course important, but also for the next generations that came along. Because we know that that was based on hate and seeing us as the other. But yet that love endured, love and romance endured. I can't imagine being stolen from my parents. It's just horrific when we think about it. And the attempt at removing those strong cultural traditions and values that have been passed on from thousands. Yet my mother and my sister, who was also taken, they say they are not victims, they are survivors. Nay, they are fighters. And that's why we are here today, because of the stolen generations, the representatives that are here today, and those that have passed on that have fought for that apology to happen in Parliament. And it was important to have that apology for the stolen generation members and also for all of us as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, because without that apology, we always will hold hurt in our heart. And as I said, their very Aboriginality could never be expunged, which is why I stand here today, Alana and I, very proud in who we are, fighters, again, warriors in our own country, because we are Australian, as well as being very proud Aboriginal people. And sometimes we're looked at as the other. We're not the other. We are the very essence of this country, Aboriginal people that have been here since time began and will always continue to be here since time began. So in the words of our ancestors, Yimalundi, Darawari, Ngunnawawari, Darawari, Galamban, Budinjima, Malarndirri, Balanjima, Yangu, Nalawiri, Dunimanyan, Galamban, Yarabinyan, Naraganawali, Yinjala, Marabiji, Malangara, Yinjala, Yinjalmara, a beautiful Ngunnawal Wiradjuri word that means respect, but much more than respect. We are in a time in our lives, in this world, in this place, that with Yinjamara, respect, it's about listening to understand, not just to respond. This place, Parliament House, sits on an important law side of our people, the Ngunnawal people. It's part of our spiritual homeland, and together with you, we are keeping the pathways of those ancestors who were the very first human footprints, the very first human voices to walk this land. Janyimaba, Nanayirabi Krulili Managai, you may leave your footprints on our lands. And as I say, it doesn't mean to go out and frolic without your shoes in the dirt, although you're very welcome to do that today. It's about being conscious of what steps we leave for others to follow. And I think that's really important to think of that today when we're thinking about what happened with our people, with our babies and our children when they were being removed, because we know this is still a practice that is happening across many states and territories today. Janyimaba, thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Carolyn Hughes, for your very powerful words and your welcome to Ngunnawal country, and to David Williams, always his marvellous didge, the sound deep into the chest, like Caroline's words, reminds us how old this story is of the first peoples of this country. We all acknowledge the Ngunnawal elders and their ancestors, and personally, all First People here today who have been part of a very long struggle, especially the members of the Stolen Generation, who fill this great hall this morning with a powerful longing to see the full measure of justice while they are alive. So a very warm welcome to the Governor-General, Her Excellency Sam Mostyn, the Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence, the Honourable Richard Marles, Foreign Minister Senator Penny Wong, Minister for Indigenous Australians Senator Malarndirri McCarthy, your many Cabinet colleagues, too many to mention you all, fellow MPs, but also the Ambassador for Indigenous Australians, Justin Mohammed, Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Jacinta Nappinjimpa-Price, representatives of the Greens, Independents, leading public servants and corporate leaders. So I hope we have some unity in the room. At all of our tables today are members of the Stolen Generation and representatives of the Healing Foundation. Please get to know them, listen to their stories, and stay in touch after this day. I want you to hear from people like Michael Welsh from the Kinchela Boys experience that is still with him 50 years later. It's still there in the head, in the heart, in the body. Or Christine Blakeney, who can tell you about the Malarndirri Children's Home. And there were homes like this, as we know, all around this country, where children were plucked from the arms of their parents and put into rooms with strangers. You could also find yourself yarning today with other Aboriginal people, and I want to mention some of them who have worked for decades trying to get this place and this nation to listen to critical advice on some of our most daunting challenges. Tom Kalmer, Linda Burney, Nova Peris, Pat Turner, Kirsty Parker, Karen Mundine, Yvonne Weldon, Sean Gordon. I could spend an hour telling you of how many people I've watched come to Canberra, try to get federal parliament and government to listen, and yet decades later, many of those bits of solid advice have not been acted on, which we will hear about from other speakers through this morning. These people, these Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, do not give up on trying to find a positive way together, how to move forward, how we find that missing sense of national purpose to overcome the pain and pointlessness of racism and to end the tedious culture wars that have burned on through all of my lifetime, and to end the political divisiveness in this House, which surely slows down the hard, relentless, patient work that we all should be involved in. We need to heed the best advice available, and that means to listen to the First Peoples and to listen to those that work with them patiently and to those that have tried to collaborate with government at all levels. The statistics, those sad numberings that we get each year, tell us that some 24,000 children were removed from their families in the last financial year. And then there's the over-incarceration of First Nations people, including children, at a shameful and terrifying rate. So we must look at that reality. We must look back to the weight of the national apology to the stolen generations, and we also need to look forward, to work together to tackle with far more vigour and unity this country's unfinished business. To address us first this morning on the way ahead with some positive priorities, it's my pleasure to introduce our Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese.
Well, good morning, and I thank Aunty Carolyn for her welcome to country, and I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting this morning. Pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge Her Excellency the Governor-General of Australia, Sam Mostyn, the Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, our Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, our Indigenous Affairs Minister, Malarndirri McCarthy, the Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus, other ministers who are here, in addition the people from across the Parliament, members and senators, welcome one and all. It is one of my greatest honours as Prime Minister to be here every year. But of course we wish that we weren't commemorating the apology, because we wish there wasn't a need for that apology to occur. But indeed, of course, there was. I particularly want to welcome the survivors who honour us with your presence here this morning. You found within yourselves the strength to turn your suffering into a chance of a better Australia. And make no mistake, when that apology was made, you not only provided a moment of healing for yourselves, you created a better Australia. There was a sigh that you could actually physically feel in this nation as people gathered in the chamber, out the front of Parliament House, in school playgrounds right around the nation with the big screens, in workplaces. The nation stopped. And whilst it was Kevin Rudd who had the courage and the conviction to utter the words that we were told for so many years beforehand would be divisive, at that moment, the nation said sorry. It was an act of leadership, the first action of the incoming Rudd Labor government, and it remains my proudest moment to be a member of the House of Representatives. It was only made possible because of the generosity, the, quite frankly, overwhelming and in some ways not even understandable or able to comprehend that level of generosity given what had been done to generations of First Nations people. So I say to you, simply in the words that are on this beautiful photograph that is before you, thanks. Thanks. That photo says so much in one image of what was a moment for this Parliament, an act of grace, an extraordinary act of generosity. And we come together here in a week of pivotal anniversaries. Yesterday we marked 60 years since the start of the Freedom Ride, a 15-day bus journey through regional New South Wales that lifted the veil on the discrimination against Indigenous Australians. Led by Charles Perkins, the Freedom Ride aroused controversy and in some quarters deep hostility. Yet what emerged from the courage of the Freedom Riders and the locals who stood with them was a wake-up call for Australia and a turning point in our self-awareness as a nation. We could no longer turn our eyes from the segregation that had been cemented into law and society, but hardened into a cruel routine, business as usual. The discrimination that blocked the way to every form of the fair go. It stood between Indigenous Australians and better health care, access to education, fair wages. It trampled on the bond between a mother and her baby. That beautiful photograph there. It even stood between children and a swim on a hot day. 6 decades on, that remarkable photo of those local boys in the pool in Malarndirri, where Charles Perkins still speaks to us. When I was the Infrastructure Minister, I had the privilege of upgrading the pool at Malarndirri. And there, black and white, boys and girls, mums and dads, all came on that occasion with the Mayor for the opening. That Freedom Ride was the beginning of the overturning of an injustice entrenched by law. It was the beginning of a chance of something better. Today it's 17 years since Prime Minister Kevin Rudd delivered the apology to stolen generations. It was a day to tell the survivors, we hear you, and it was a day of catharsis that held the promise of a fresh beginning. The apology could not have happened without your courage, nor would we have had the annual report that is closing the gap. Yet, like the Freedom Ride, it was the target of controversy and hostile opposition. The power of hindsight only serves to render that opposition even more baffling. Those like John Howard, who explicitly argued that it would divide, were wrong. Australians were united in a moment of fundamental decency. When the apology was formally offered here, in this very institution that had so let you down, only one question remained. Why didn't it just happen? I was raised as I think most parents raise their kids, that when you do something wrong in the playground, you just say sorry. That's how you reconcile as individuals. Why didn't it happen sooner? I keep returning to Prime Minister Rudd's words that day. Let us turn this page together and write this new chapter in our nation's story together. And I pay tribute to the leadership of Brendan Nelson on that day as well, as the leader of the Liberal Party, who had the courage to resist those within his own organisation and say, no, this is going to be a moment of bipartisanship. And he showed real leadership on that day. And it would have been a different event were there some of the cantankerous opposition and the pettiness and the opportunism that some showed on that day. It was the first act of the new government and my proudest. It was a day that mattered in the life of the nation. When you're elected to this place, you can either make a decision to try and enlarge the nation, or you can make a decision to try and turn it inward, to try and make it smaller, to look for how can we create a division and an argument about a flag or about a word. My view is very strong. Regardless of, and I stood in this room on the first day, my first day as Prime Minister, at the breakfast that we had for the opening of Parliament in 2022. And I said, when you're sitting on the porch, we're not here for all that long, particularly when we bear in mind the fact we share this continent with the oldest living culture on earth that's been here for 65,000 years. I've been here a while, feels like a long time, 20-something. It's nothing. When you're sitting on the porch, when you leave here, you want to be able to look back and say, I tried, I did my best to enlarge the nation. And that certainly is my objective. And for that, I have no regrets in enlarging the nation, because we do get there. That's the thing. The apology didn't come at the first time it was suggested. It took a long time. 2 steps forward, 1 back. But history does move forward. And the arc of history bends towards justice, as the great Martin Luther King declared all those years ago. I do want to quote survivor Ian Ham, a Yorta Yorta man taken from his mum in 1964 when he was just a few weeks old. He says this: "It is perhaps a measure of our maturing as a nation that we're becoming more prepared to own and accept the bits of our national narrative that are unsavoury and uncomfortable, as much as we want to celebrate that which makes us proud and confident. That day was when Australia crossed a threshold. It's where we stopped the argument about whether there were stolen generations. It marked a critical turning point, and it encompassed something greater too. Indirectly, it was a broader apology to Aboriginal Australia." So the apology was never intended as the end of the story, rather, as Prime Minister Rudd said, the beginning of a new chapter. We put behind us the old chapter that took from you the most profound of rights to grow up safely in your own family. And together we write a chapter of self-determination. The new chapter must be in Australia, where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have the same choices and the same opportunities as non-Indigenous Australians. An Australia in which the government works carefully with you towards a future in which Indigenous Australians have the economic security of a job and a home. What guides my government every day is the instinct to ensure all Australians get the same chance in life, to work towards a reality in which all Australians have power over their destiny. And this all began when you and all survivors, through patience, persistence and grace, at last found your nation was ready to hear your hard truths. The process of healing that began with the apology goes on, a process we're assisting by extending the Territory's Stolen Generations redress scheme to the 30th of June 2028. This means we'll continue to accept applications from Stolen Generations survivors for an additional 18 months, bringing it more into line with state redress schemes in place. I want to thank the Healing Foundation and Stolen Generation organisations for supporting more than 60 survivors from across the country to attend this breakfast, to come together to remember, make connections and heal together. I acknowledge the dozens of Stolen Generations organisations driven by survivors, which provide much needed services and support to their communities. The apology was an acknowledgement that the better future that is possible for our country can only be brought within reach when we fully come to terms with our past. The old saying my mum used to say to me, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. Pretty simple Australian ethos, pretty simple, equally applicable to our nation. Memory, of course, has to be a conscious act. It must be cared for, must be tended, must be nurtured, and it must be handed into the care of the next generation. That is why this anniversary is so important. That's why for every year that I'm Prime Minister, I will attend this breakfast, because it is important that this moment in history be turned into practical reform, making a real difference to people. This is an expression of memory which is wrapped in our collective gratitude to all of you. And from learning from the mistakes of the past, we can renew our promise, this nation's promise, of a better future for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Your echoes of the important history through a very long struggle brings us really to the official data that is troubling to contemplate that for very complex reasons, in the view of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we seem to have an ongoing stolen generation despite the promises we have made. What's more, it's 30 years after the Bringing Them Home report. We still have not seen, in the eyes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, important response to so many of those recommendations. It's advice that goes unheeded. So all, please imagine for the Stolen Generation members here this morning, what it is like for them personally to see the annual litany of what remains to be done, of what remains to be recognised, of where we have not brought justice for the stolen generation, and in particular see through their eyes the figures of the escalation of child removal when we have pledged not to let this happen again. So we are about to hear from the Stolen Generations Reference Group, which advises the Healing Foundation on their priorities, on how they would like our nation to address these critical things while they are with us. Please welcome Ian Ham, Maisie Austin, Jennifer Caruso, Tony Hansen, Yvonne Mills and Michael Welsh.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvonne Mills, and my connection to family and country is through my mother's people, the Guguda and Mirning people of the far west coast of South Australia. We gather here today for the 7th anniversary of the National Apology and to recognise that the Australian Parliament on this day in 2008 officially apologised for the first removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families. I was living and working in Canberra when the announcement of the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission's national inquiry into the separation of children from their families was made. My reaction, complete disbelief. To hear children were separated from their families in every state and territory of this nation. My immediate thoughts turned to what I was told as a 6-year-old child. Your mother did not want you, so she gave you away. Those words haunted me and compounded the trauma I had already experienced. I am a stolen generation survivor, the youngest of 5 children, separated from our mother. We were young children and I was a baby. And I must acknowledge my 3 sisters that are here today with me. Our mother was exempted from the Aborigines Act, which meant she ceased to be an Aborigine. The colour of her skin, however, prevented her from being treated equally in the society where she was forced to live. The National Inquiry from 1995 to 1997 examined the past laws, practices and policies which resulted in the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families by compulsion, duress and undue influence. The Commission published its findings in the Bringing Them Home report in April 1997, and it was endorsed in this Federal Parliament on the 26th of May 1997. And this is the report. This is the report that has been with me ever since the report was released. 54 recommendations were made that included procedures for implementation and components of reparation. In recognition of the gross violation of human rights, each recommendation was clearly presented in that report. As a result, the inquiry concluded grounds for reparation, that the forcible removal of Indigenous children was a gross violation of their human rights. Forcible removal was an act of genocide. The United Nations Convention on Genocide specifically includes forcibly transferring children of a group to another group with the intention of destroying the group. I spent the next 21 years of my life searching for the truth, participating in the process of being interviewed by the National Inquiry team, collecting records through State Archives, South Australian Museum, Lutheran Archives, and submitting an application to the South Australian Stolen Generations Reparation Scheme. I sat in this great hall when former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd made the apology. Through the reparation scheme, I finally learned the truth, and that was not until 2018, not that long ago. I did not inflict the trauma of separation on myself, and without the immediate and necessary care meant the trauma was left to take over my life, and it's not so easy to just simply forget. This year marks 28 years since the Bringing Them Home report was tabled in 1997, and Stolen Generation survivors are still waiting for action to be taken by those responsible and to honour commitment to implementing the recommendations in the spirit in which they were intended. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Auntie Jenny Caruso. I am from South Australia, but originally I was from Alice Springs. I am an Eastern Aranda Afghan Wanyi woman. This morning there is somebody who I'd like to say hello to, and that's Willie Tilmouth. I want to say hello to my brother cousin, who reminded me this morning we haven't seen each other for years. And we were on Croker, we were taken 27th of May, significant date, eh? 27th of May, when I was about 3.5. Willie, I think, is a little bit younger than me, but I saw him this morning and he said to me, "Hello, Jenny Wren." And I never let anybody ever call me Jenny Wren once I was sent down and away from my family. And it just reminded me that to my family and to my Croker Island mob, I'm Jenny Wren, and that's healing for me. So today, you're sitting here and you're thinking, this is something that happened so long ago, and, you know, surely there has been movement. But it's incremental. We're here. I see Willie, and that's part of my healing, and it's making the day. So, sorry, but today the most important people are my Stolen Generations people and my brother, Willie. The wealth of the nation is not measured by its GDP, but by the socio-economic health and well-being of its most disadvantaged. All government reports show that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and communities experience the highest levels of disadvantage in the nation, and the evidence shows that Stolen Generations survivors as a cohort are impacted by higher levels of disadvantage than the overall Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander populations. Looking at us, you might make the mistake of thinking that we are high functioning, that we've overcome our trauma, and that it is not impeding our lives. That is not true. The trauma of removal, placement, loss, abuses suffered at the hands and hearts of do-gooders and not so do-gooders is ever present. We have no escape from it. We're camouflage experts. We cover our trauma with our outside appearances. As written in the Bringing Them Home report, the past is very much with us today in the continuing devastation of the lives of Indigenous Australians. That devastation cannot be addressed unless the whole community listens with an open heart and mind to the stories of what has happened in the past, and having listened and understood, commits itself to reconciliation. We are the embodiment of all those statistics of disadvantage, and our governments, state, territory and federal, have the power to alleviate the trauma of tens of thousands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, Australian people. It's time to move beyond imagining and move to meaningful commitment to and investment in delivering on the Bringing Them Home recommendations, especially given that Stolen Generations are an ageing population. We don't want to say we're dying quickly because, you know, it sort of puts a mortality on us, but we are an ageing population. To implement the recommendations is not only just, it's actually fiscally strategic and it's good policy. A new Healing Foundation report has found that only 6% of the Bringing Them Home report recommendations made to support Stolen Generations survivors and their families almost 28 years ago have been clearly implemented. The Healing Foundation is recommending a national healing package of urgent changes to enable survivors to live out our days with dignity. Survivors are ageing, and urgent response is required from all sides of politics, all levels of government, police, churches and others with responsibilities to support the stolen generations. This isn't the first time that we've stood here with a new report documenting our needs and the failures of successive governments to address them. Surely this should be the last time that we are standing here.
Bad mistake. Hello there. Bear with me. It's very difficult for me at this moment. These are tears of happiness. I'm a survivor of the Kinchela Boys Aboriginal Corporation, and one of 7 that was taken from my mother. And today, I just want to mention a couple of little things that to try and help us all to understand that the journey of healing can only happen by what we're doing here now, is by talking. And, you know, I've heard it said by one lady once a year, please explain. Yeah, we'd love to have the chance for people to explain to us why this happened. Why did they do this to us? I need to let you know that I'm one of those 7 children that were taken from Mum. I need to let you know that I now have 59 children that have my blood running through them. They have my trauma running through them. And I want you to know that this is a growing disease. It's not a disease that is under control yet. We want the right to have the resources to rebuild our family structures. We want the right to that. That was taken away from us when we got removed from our families, got removed from our love. I want that right back for my family to be able to function a little bit better in the colonised country that we're living in now. My people are Walewan people. My names are James Michael Whitty Welch, or number 36. The day that they shifted me through that gate at Kinchela, I was no longer allowed to use my name. I was given a number. I was number 36, my brother was number 17. If we was using those names and got caught, we would be flogged, starved, did whatever they wanted to do to us. That's something that we couldn't talk about, something I was so angry about that I spent a lot of years in a trauma world, in and out of pain, until I started to search for something that was better, to fix my children's lives up. The people I have here with me now, the people that helped us with the Healing Foundation, and all the people across the land that's come into contact with me over the years, Jeff, and there's so many that I want to thank, but I really want you to help us move forward in this, help us hold this pain in a place where it can no longer function out into the world. It will never go away. Myself, I'm so pleased to be here at the moment. I got a grin on my face that I'm happy after my tears. I just thank you for letting me heal myself here today a little bit more. I got things written down here, but I got no idea how to be able to read them out here. I take Shannon and Ian. But, you know, thank you so very much. This is a happy moment in my life I will never forget. Thank you.
My name's Tony Anson, Wadandi Bibbulmun man from the southwest of West Australia, also connected to Menang country in the Great Southern. I was taken in 1970 at the age of 3 and released in 1985. So it's our recent history. In 1948, the United Nations adopted the Genocide Convention, which clearly defines genocide as actions intend to destroy a group, such as forcibly transferring children from one group to another. This is exactly what happened with us. These were not random events. They were planned and carried out by the government to break apart Indigenous families and communities. In 1997, the Bringing Them Home report uncovered the full extent of these policies, recognising them as acts of genocide and a crime against humanity. It was an attempt to destroy our identity and culture. The apology acknowledges that the removal were a grave injustice. It mentioned that the goal for some in authority was to eliminate the so-called problem of the Aboriginal population by gradually eliminating Aboriginal people of mixed heritage. This wasn't just bad policy, the results of some kind of ignorance and misguided paternalism. It was a deliberate attempt to erase Indigenous identity by breeding out the black. One of the key figures behind these policies was A.O. Neville. We called him Neville the Devil, and I work and sit in his office where he used to sit in. The Chief Protector of the Aborigines in Western Australia from 1915 to 1940, he ran a system designed to ensure that Indigenous people of mixed descent, whom he referred to as half-castes, were absorbed into white society. Neville's goal was to erase Indigenous identities by taking children with lighter skin and segregating them from their families and communities in settlements and church missions. The WA government also strictly controlled who Aboriginal people could marry. Breeding out the colour is what they called it. Indigenous families were torn apart and their cultural bonds were broken. This wasn't about integrating people into society, it was about wiping out everything that made us distinct. These policies were not carried out in isolation. They were backed by the laws. Religious institutions working closely with government also playing a key role in carrying out these removals to dozens of missions throughout the state. Thousands of children continue to be taken away up until the 1970s. It wasn't just a few bad actors, it was a system supported by the law, the church and society at large. Yet despite these well-established historical facts, some prominent Australians, in my view, continue to promote the cover-up and denial of them to this day. The legacy of these government policies is still with us today. Many Indigenous Australians continue to suffer from intergenerational trauma caused by these removals, loss of culture, identity and connection to family. They suffer worse mental and physical health, more times in jail, worse unemployment, homelessness and deeper poverty, to list a few. This ongoing damage is a direct result of these policies. For the survivors of the stolen generation and their families, it's only fair that we acknowledge the harm done and provide compensation for the suffering they endured. Compensation isn't just about money, it's about recognising the deep pain caused and restoring the dignity and value of Indigenous cultures. While many states and territories have set up a scheme to provide redress and compensation, Western Australia and Queensland still have not done so. It's time for the whole nation to step up and support these survivors in a meaningful way. The forced removal of children in Australia was an isolated policy. It was a deliberate, systemic attempt to destroy a people. It was genocide. We must face the truth. The poison must be exposed before the healing can start. Only by acknowledging it, providing redress and compensation, and continuing to support survivors, we can move forward together towards healing and justice. My organisation, Yokai Healing Our Spirit, made a documentary film about this issue last year called Genocide in the Wildflower State, and I urge all of you in this room and in this country to watch it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maisie Austin. I have connections from my father's side, the Wutiti and Yatakanu from the Cape York, and Gurindji and Kanarakan from the Northern Territory on my mother's side. So I'm from Darwin, so I'm glad it's 29 degrees today. But this day is about stolen generations people. There's been a lack of commitment on the implementation of the Bringing Them Home report, as we've heard. One of the most important and outstanding considerations is equal redress for all survivors. Australia must act on this before it's too late. A lot of survivors have missed out on compensation as they've already passed away. The timelines are too short or they don't meet the criteria. But I'm happy to hear that the redress scheme has been extended to 2028. But we still don't have redress schemes in Western Australia and Queensland, so that needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency. We must act on the recommendations the Healing Foundation has released around the unfinished business of the Bringing Them Home report, and that's the report that's been released. We must act on access to culturally safe, trauma-informed aged care and health services, urgent, equitable redress, prioritised access to records, and investment in stolen generations organisations. But I would now like to invite all the stolen generations survivors here today who are able or would like to stand, be recognised and acknowledged. So all of you, hop up. Thank you. So these are the people why we are here today. So enjoy the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Thank you to the Stolen Generation Reference Group. You've connected a lot of pieces of history to where we are now and given us a challenge to see what more we can do and to make it personal, to take away from this morning the stories that you've heard and to do something with that pain, as Michael suggested, how to move from that pain to smiling and laughing together again. It is possible. You show us that. Thank you for that. I'd now like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence, the Honourable Richard Marles, to address us on these issues.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and can I start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people and pay my respects to Elders past and present. Can I thank Auntie Caroline for her beautiful welcome to country this morning. Can I acknowledge Anthony, our Prime Minister, Penny, the government leader in the Senate, Malarndirri and Jacinta, our Minister and Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, and through all of them, my parliamentary colleagues and other dignitaries who are here this morning. Can I acknowledge all the members of the Stolen Generation who are present at this breakfast, and if you'll indulge me, can I acknowledge one in particular, and that is Michael McLeod. This week, each year, has become a special and important week in the life of our Parliament and our nation. And it has developed to it a certain rhythm. On Monday, we delivered the Closing the Gap report. It is a serious and complex report. It's a report which does illuminate government action and progress, but over the broad sweep of the 16 reports which have been handed down, it also observes that the gap is stubborn, it is persistent, and it tells us, perhaps understandably, that a gap which is the consequence of generations of policy will take a generational effort to close. The character of this morning's breakfast, though, is different. This morning is a breakfast which commemorates, which celebrates an event which occurred 17 years ago, which is the underpinning of this week in Parliament, the apology to the stolen generation. For those of us who were present on that day, we felt like we were witnessing something that was big and important, and we were. Not the whole nation, but just about the whole nation came together in a moment of extraordinary unity. And words, political words, which are at times used to create division, had no place on that day. We just gathered to do something that was good. And in that moment, there was reconciliation. And there was a sense that the power of reconciliation was boundless and unlimited. The goodwill that was present in this building, in this city, across the nation, in that moment, made us feel that it was possible to move mountains. And this breakfast is a reminder that the flame that was lit then still burns, and those mountains will be moved. Maybe not as soon as we would like, maybe not as fast as it was imagined would happen on that day. But as we gather on this morning, and we remember what was in our hearts on that day, it is a moment to really believe that reconciliation will happen and the gap will be closed. And today, as I have at every one of these breakfasts, which I've attended from the very beginning, on its journey from the National Press Gallery to the New South Wales Parliament to New South Wales Government House, back to here, in the Great Hall of Parliament House where this breakfast and this event belongs. I want to thank Michael McLeod and Doug Russell because this event is their brainchild. I want to thank them for giving us the opportunity to hear the work that is still to be done. I want to thank them for giving us the opportunity to hear the stories of courage. But above all, I want to thank them for giving us the opportunity to remember the power of hope. Thank you.
After so many moving words, we will now have some magical, moving music. You're about to hear a wonderful example of the collaboration. Like the black and white notes in music, you don't have great music without those two fitting perfectly together, naturally together. I'd like to welcome to the stage, and it is a true pleasure, the Bayoreagal Choir and the Sydney Conservatorium of Music Aboriginal Music Ensemble. The choir director is Nadi Simpson, Yuwalarai singer-composer that many of you will have heard over the years in her band, the Stiff Gins. On the keyboard today is a jazz virtuoso who you will also, many of you will know, Kevin Hunt. And he's a man who regularly shows what can happen in the creative collaboration between First Peoples and the rest of those who love music and know how it is one of the great healing powers in the human world. The choir today is going to perform Nadi Simpson's composition. It's entitled Old Ones. Please welcome the choir and the Sydney Conservatorium Music Aboriginal Music Ensemble.
Yeah.
the beauty and the power of the human voice and voices raised together. Thank you to Nadia, to Kevin, the choir, the ensemble for putting your heart and soul into that on such an important day for the stolen generations. Thank you all. Please enjoy some time now to talk at your table, to enjoy your breakfast, and we'll resume shortly. Thank you. Thank you. It is a lot of voices to hear, but each one is a very important message. And so take all the time through the rest of the day to keep yarning, listening and acting. But I want to make sure we have time for you all to hear before people scatter from someone who really is juggling one of the most challenging roles. For an Aboriginal politician, you've got to represent all your people, all your constituents, and somehow the weight of the country is on your shoulders because you're expected to find that message of hope. Everyone who has had this role realises how difficult it is. With Malarndirri McCarthy, I've known her from the days that she was an ABC journalist, and then when she was gathering so much grassroots experience in the Northern Territory Assembly, listening in communities all over about the critical problems we still face. This gives you grounding, but when you come to this town, you've then got to do the impossible. We've got to move the country forward on things that has not happened for centuries. So to raise the hope, to raise the spirit of unity, would you please welcome Yanawa woman, Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Malarndirri McCarthy.
Good morning, and thank you, Auntie Caroline, for welcoming us, Mob. Just my deepest pleasure to be here with all of you and to see so many familiar faces, but also meeting some new ones and listening to your stories. You know, you're our leaders, you know, as far as I'm concerned, as a Yanyuwa Garo woman, you know, you Mob, your stories. You lead us and guide us as the generations that are following behind you. And so many of all the aunties and uncles from the Northern Territory, Auntie Maisie, so many of you here as well and right across the country. I guess from my perspective, firstly, I just want to acknowledge Linda Burney and the work that Linda Burney has done and continues to do for our people across this country. And also Senator Pat Dodson, these two amazing people that I've had the greatest gift to be able to work beside for a very long time, to watch, to learn, to listen, and it's what I continue to do right across the country. I'm very excited to have taken on the role of Indigenous Australians Minister 6 months ago. It's a hard task, but I love it. You know, I love the fact that I can meet all our mob around the nation, and I'm still trying to get around there, and I will. But I also think that one of the greatest gifts of our people is our ability to rise above. You know, the Deputy Prime Minister said in that one word of hope, our ability to rise above all that dares to just keep us down, to pull us down, to create a sense in us that we're not worthy, to develop a deep feeling in us that we shouldn't be here. And yet there's something amongst our people, universally around this country and around the world as First Nations people, where we strive and thrive, and we're still here. So 17 years ago, when this Parliament, through the Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, made the apology and the country and the world listened, it is important that we never forget that day. But even more important is what you're doing now to make sure that we keep doing it. We've heard speakers here, and I know from the Healing Foundation itself and the report that you've done under the guidance of Shannon Dodson and the Committee of the Stolen Gens, you continually remind us that too many of our kids are still being removed. And that's important for me in my role as Indigenous Australians Minister, but it's important for me as a Yanyo Gada woman. I don't like seeing that. You know, my family, we raise so many children because we know what it's like when they're raised in a system that we've seen hurts our families. So thank you for keep reminding us. But I'd like to think that if we have the ability under the Prime Minister to move forward, to be given a chance, a second go at our term here in this Parliament to keep leading, to keep working through these very, very fundamental issues for our people, the high rates of removal, the high rates of incarceration. We need to keep doing that collectively. When I came in as Minister, the first thing I did was reached across the Parliament to my opponents to try to have a sense of unity and peace, that Indigenous people must not be used as the political football. Now, everyone's laughed at me. They've said, that's ridiculous. That will never happen. I said, yeah, but I'm going to dead set try. I will try, and I will keep trying, because there are too many of our families hurting, whether it's in the area of child removal, whether it's in the area of incarceration, whether it's in the area of poverty and deep chronic kidney disease and failures. I will keep trying to work in this Parliament across the political spectrum to find that peaceful road to enable our families to be the people we're here to be in this country everywhere. So aunties and uncles, thank you. You keep teaching me. To those who I've walked very closely with over generations, and I acknowledge Yvonne Weldon and the work that you're doing as well. I just think that it's important. You all have a sense of influence and guidance to people like myself and others coming behind you. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for your stories, Uncle, with Kinchela. And we will never forget. Yo, Bawajibara.
Personally, I've witnessed one of the most powerful ways that our nation does change socially on a significant scale is that empowerment that comes through education. Our next speaker is actively demonstrating there is hope. He's showing the impact a new generation of emerging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders are already having on our thinking, on our view of history, on truth and what needs to be done still. A Wiradjuri man, a Career Trackers alumnus, Jackson Whiting grew up in Blacktown. He studied his way to a double degree at Macquarie Uni. Then he joined the Australian Public Service. Not always the first choice for Aboriginal people, but Jackson saw a path where he could make a difference. In several roles in the public service, he gained new learning, but he could see things could be done better. Policy could be sharpened and clarified and made understandable. He has had a position in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, which moves him closer to the decision-making. And at the same time, by tackling a Masters of Public Administration at ANU, an inspiration to all of his people, Jackson is now looking at what more effective methods down here in this House, in government around Australia, might improve the real life delivery of things that change the life and bring hope to all of the families that Malarndirri just referred to. Would you please welcome someone from the hopeful generation, Jackson Whiting.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on today, as well as where I proudly call home, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also want to thank them for their continued care and contributions they make to this region to make it such a special place to live. I'd also like to pay my respects to all other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. When I was offered the opportunity to speak today, I was unsure what I wanted to talk about, what I wanted to focus on. This day means many things to many people, and it made me think deep down about what it means to me. As I reflected on what to say today, I kept returning to one question: what does this moment ask of us? For me, that question has shaped the reasoning for why I am a public servant, and I'll get to that shortly. 17 years ago, our nation took an important step. The national apology for the stolen generations was a moment of truth-telling and healing for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who had suffered from previous government policies which forced child removal and assimilation. It was also a moment of honest reflection for those who had not experienced it, to understand the impact that these policies had and the inequalities faced within the nation. But it wasn't just a moment, it was the marking of the next step, a commitment to take the opportunity to do better. And we must do better. How do we do better? How can we fulfill our commitment and meet the opportunity to right the wrongs and create a better Australia? Well, on an individual level, we do this by turning up for one another, by giving a hand up, not a handout. A hand up can be as simple as an encouraging word, an open door, or a system designed to empower rather than exclude. It's these small but meaningful actions that can change a person's life. By helping those that need it, we not only strengthen them, but we strengthen ourselves and our communities, creating a more prosperous society. Throughout my life, there have been individuals and organisations which have given me a hand up, ultimately helping me get to where I am today. And without them, I have no doubt my life would be very different. Whether it was supporting me getting into university or getting an internship, or even providing honest feedback, each of these small acts accumulated and made a big difference. Now, don't get me wrong, I've always worked hard. I've given my absolute best effort, and I've pursued excellence no matter what my objective was. But unfortunately, there are countless Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people out there that don't receive the hand up needed to ensure they make it to where they are striving for. And that brings me to why I'm a public servant. I understand my skill set and the value I can contribute to society. So to show my thanks to those who have helped me over the years, I've decided to use these skills to pay it forward through being a public servant. To have this career is a real honour and a privilege. It allows me to work with some of the greatest minds to help tackle some of the greatest problems. But most importantly, however, it allows me to turn up every day and give 110% to working towards ensuring those in our communities who need a hand up get one. With all this in mind, I have a simple ask. When you wake up every morning, remember our history, the commitment the national apology symbolises, and ask yourself, how are you going to give a hand up today to right the wrongs and create a better future for all Australians? Because when we lift others, we lift our nation, and that is how we'll do better. Lastly, I'd like to thank Michael and Message Stick for giving me the opportunity to speak today as a Career Tracker alumnus. And I truly thank you all for giving me some of your precious time this morning, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Jackson. I promise we will do it every day. And remember, it is that simple. What are we going to do with the day? 17 years ago, Kevin Rudd, as Prime Minister, got up one morning and delivered the words of truth in the national apology to the stolen generations that were long overdue, but so heartfelt. We will now revisit that historic commitment and then hear a new message from Washington, D.C., where Dr. Kevin Rudd is today Australia's ambassador. Please remember this moment 17 years ago.
Today we honour the Indigenous peoples of this land, the oldest continuing cultures in human history. We reflect on their past mistreatment. We reflect in particular on the mistreatment of those who were stolen generations, this blemished chapter in our national history. The time has now come for the nation to turn a new page in Australia's history by righting the wrongs of the past and so moving forward with confidence to the future. We apologise for the laws and policies of successive parliaments and governments that have inflicted profound grief, suffering and loss on these our fellow Australians. We apologise especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, their communities and their country. For the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants and for their families left behind, we say sorry. To the mothers and the fathers, the brothers and the sisters, for the breaking up of families and communities, we say sorry. And for the indignity and degradation thus inflicted on a proud people and a proud culture, we say sorry. We, the Parliament of Australia, respectfully request that this apology be received in the spirit in which it is offered, as part of the healing of the nation. For the future, we take heart, resolving that this new page in the history of our great continent can now be written. We today take this first step by acknowledging the past and laying claim to a future that embraces all Australians. To the stolen generations, I say the following. As Prime Minister of Australia, I am sorry. On behalf of the Government of Australia, I am sorry. On behalf of the Parliament of Australia, I am sorry. And I offer you this apology without qualification. We apologise for the hurt, the pain and suffering we, the Parliament, have caused you by the laws that previous Parliaments have enacted. We apologise for the indignity, the degradation and the humiliation these laws embodied. We offer this apology to the mothers, the fathers, the brothers, the sisters, the families and the communities whose lives were ripped apart by the actions of successive governments under successive parliaments. So let us turn this page together. Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, government and opposition, Commonwealth and state, and write this new chapter in our nation's story together.
Good morning to you all in Canberra, here from the traditional lands of the Anacostan and Piscataway peoples, what we now call Washington, D.C. I'd also like to acknowledge the first Australians on whose lands we meet in Australia and whose cultures we celebrate as the oldest continuing cultures in human history. And my deepest respects to those joining us who belong to the stolen generations, those survivors who never cease to amaze me with their wisdom and their compassion, and to all First Nations peoples joining us today. To the Prime Minister, ministerial and parliamentary colleagues, past and present. And of course, Message Stick and the indefatigable Michael McLeod for so strongly supporting and growing this event as they have for so many, many years. It's an important occasion, I think, not because it reminds us of the events of the day of the apology itself, of course it does that, but it renews in the minds of all of us the struggle of so many courageous Australians over the decades who dared to speak the truth about our history, especially those elders from the past, without whom there may never have been an apology at all. Yet they didn't live to hear it for themselves. Those great Australians contributed to a multi-generational project for justice. They had no guarantee of success and a lot of cause for doubt. Our generation continues that project today. We do so in the spirit of reconciliation, of human solidarity, and a sense of national progress. As I said on that day back in 2008, we lay claim to a future that embraces all Australians, a future where we embrace the possibility of new solutions to enduring problems where old approaches have failed, and a future based on mutual respect, mutual resolve, and mutual responsibility. And we have cause for optimism because, as messy as that project can look at times, we are constantly gaining a better understanding of what works and what doesn't work. I was especially pleased to see that the partnership agreement just signed with the Northern Territory and peak organisations has emphasised strengthening Aboriginal community-controlled organisations to deliver services on the ground, and also on creating and funding local groups so that local people with local knowledge take the lead in designing local services that work for them. The jury is in. Greater autonomy can deliver overall better outcomes and at lower cost. The incredible success of Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations are a case in point. They are trusted on the ground, they are accountable to their communities, and they deliver results. It's often forgotten that Indigenous populations all over the world have suffered disproportionately under COVID. That's not the case in Australia. In fact, Indigenous people are significantly underrepresented, thanks in no small part to community-controlled health sectors. But autonomy only works when individual communities feel encouraged and empowered to pursue ideas that might surprise outsiders. That means this may be a bumpy road, and I'm sure some political and media critics will be tempted to announce their hot takes about this or that development along the way. But my encouragement to potential critics is to think carefully about how they can express themselves constructively. Australians, whoever they are, wherever they live, whatever their background, want to see our country building on our successes. Another place where we've seen great self-determination in action has been in the business sector. Something my government did early on was to ask a bright new MP to look at establishing a body to back Indigenous entrepreneurs and get them in front of corporates, not as charity cases, but as competitive and dynamic suppliers. This was being advanced by Michael McLeod, who had seen similar models work overseas. And that young MP who chaired that inquiry was a bloke called Richard Marles. You might have heard of him. In fact, I've just had him here in Washington, DC. Since then, Supply Nation has made real, meaningful change in so many lives. They've recently signed up their 5,000th supplier, one business, one family, one community at a time. I've spoken about elders past and present, so I'd be remiss not to talk about those who are now emerging. To be frank, I never cease to be impressed and inspired by the young First Nations Australians whenever and wherever around the world I meet them. I have no doubt whatsoever that they make their elders feel very proud. In the room today, I know we have Tia Rigney and Thomas King, who are scholars through the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation. And I'm glad that Michael's Message Stick Foundation and the government are working together to mentor and empower First Nations youth. There's plenty of work to do. The apology was never the end. It was only the beginning. The apology goes hand in hand with closing the gap. They are inseparable. They are two sides of the one coin. But the apology wasn't inevitable, and neither is closing the gap. Progress is happening before our eyes precisely because across our society, people are working to make it happen. So we honour those who led the way in the past, and we gain hope and inspiration from those who are now lifting up the torch for the first time. By looking unflinchingly at our past, our history, warts and all, even when it's uncomfortable, we learn about ourselves in the present. Just as we look unflinchingly to the future and those young people lighting the pathway ahead for us. Thank you all. I wish you the absolute best for today. The apology was the beginning of the long project called reconciliation. And as Martin Luther King in this country has reminded us, the arc of history bends slowly towards justice.
We thank Ambassador Rudd, and we wish him and his partner Therese Rain good health and success on a difficult time in Washington with a world changing, and we are grateful that he could digitally, virtually join us here this morning to take us back through history, but still to maintain the positivity, the encouragement for the next generation that will complete the work and that we will see healing and hope and build a nation that is closer to greatness as a society than anywhere else you can see in the world today. We do owe a member of the stolen generation named Michael McLeod a real debt, because in gathering us each year, he gathers the power for the change. He reminds us of what hasn't been done. But through his foundation, he's showing also that as a business fella, he can connect, he can do what Jackson Whiting said must be done, which is the hand-up approach, which is to realise there is talent in every community, from Blacktown, where Jackson grew up, to any remote community or regional town. There are still kids waiting for that opportunity, and we can give that opportunity. We can make it happen together. I would invite Michael to come now with his closing words, a vote of thanks to you for supporting this effort each year for so long. Please welcome Michael.
That's a long walk. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the lands that we are on, and to thank custodians, the elders, aunties and uncles of communities here in the ACT for allowing us to hold this amazing function. It's important that we do acknowledge them. And Auntie Caroline, you just did an amazing welcome to country earlier, and I really, really appreciate it of it. I have to say, I get up here and I do this vote of thanks, and I've got to say, there were just so many good speakers. And Jackson, wherever you are, congratulations on your wedding and honeymoon. Good, yeah, cool. Got to be said, we didn't think we'd get you here in time, so that was really good. I'm going to share something. A lot of you do know my story. I'm the youngest of 6 siblings. When I was 12 months of age, we were all taken away from our parents and made wards of the state in New South Wales, and then from there split up across Australia. I didn't get to meet my siblings again until my mid-20s, and by that time I'd been through so many state ward homes, so many foster homes. I had little contact with Aboriginal communities or my own communities. It didn't happen for a long time. The past policies that were there were working on me, and I was a result of it. Eventually I hit my rock bottom and everything collapsed, and ended up in drugs and alcohol, heroin addict, all that stuff you've heard of, your homelessness, and I always say there, but for the grace of God, I was able to make some healthy choices, and I did, with amazing people around me who did support me, regardless of the terrible decisions I made. I am kind of lucky in that sense that there were these amazing people, wonderful people around me. Sometimes as Aboriginal people, we don't have that luxury, and I hear it up here all the time. I sometimes forget, as I've been able to start a business, to get clean and sober. I think I'm 20-odd years clean and sober, who knows? But it's like, there just came a time when I wanted to start a little business, and I did. The message to communications was basically what happened. That's what came out of it. And to Aidan, thank you for you and your brother for supporting us in the very early days. So the Tudor Hopes, Macquarie Telecom. And it was like, that was just an amazing thing to happen. And more importantly, the moment we signed up our first corporate, IAG, Sam Mostyn, the Governor-General, you were there, the first one. You rewired my mind, and I had trust suddenly that Australia did want to give me an opportunity. And I did use the black label, I'm going to tell you, ruthlessly, because I wanted to break the back of poverty on myself and then use it as the model to then help other Indigenous entrepreneurs, and there are a few here who started off, Charlie and all of them. Yeah, it's like amazing what we were able to do. And, Supply Nation was born out of it, and it was like, wow. From where I came from to suddenly having a business which had 10 mil annual revenue coming through, highly profitable, and then to build things like Supply Nation and to be on career trackers as the inaugural chair and to fundamentally do things I never thought I could possibly do because of where I came from, I thought that was pretty good. And I thought, I can sit back on those legacies, and nah, it doesn't work that way. And when the apology was given, I've got to say, that was my chance as a survivor, a member of the stolen generation, to be able to do something with resources that I had then, and a network which I had then. And it was my intent that every year, and I look at it 17 years down the track, and it's like, what are we doing? What are we changing? And then my heroes, uncles and aunties from the Healing Foundation, get up here and share exactly what it's about, and that's what this venue is about. It's about informing Australians right across Australia. That is not about funding or anything like that, it's about investment to ensure that we don't repeat the same policies that, it's just a disgrace that it does happen. It continues to happen. I've made a decision to, in the next 20, 30 years, may I live that long, to really focus on Aboriginal youth who are still lost and falling through the cracks of our society. And that's my focus, and it will be. And we're getting great traction. It's really good. It's mentioned, Prime Minister, that blew me away. So it's like fantastic. He hears it over in Washington. So it's like, More importantly, you guys, you're all here. You're part of the solution moving forward. And at your tables are members of the survivors. And to have them tell their story, because we cannot forget, we cannot continue to repeat the mistakes that impact intergenerational trauma right through to our youth. And that's where my focus is going to be. Well, Jackson, you're doing amazing stuff in what you do in Career Trackers. As an alumni, you've done your course and everything. And then corporate Australia. I've been a great believer that it doesn't need to all sit with government. I think we have to, as Aboriginal people, come up with the solutions to better ourselves, especially after a referendum no. And that's where the focus is for myself, coming up with solutions, but talking and consulting with members, of the stolen generation. And it's a fundamental thing that we need to do. I'm going to say here, this event, which we have here, 17th year anniversary, it will morph, it'll change. We'll continue to have it, but we want to bring on partners like the Healing Foundation, NIA, other organisations that understand what it means to grow and expand and get a national, observation of what we're doing, and that is so important. I mean, God forbid anything happened to me, but what would happen to the anniversary each year? So it'd probably go on. I'm just very paranoid. But more importantly, it has to go on. And I'm not the greatest, brain in the here. I wish I went to university. I wish I had that type of education. Maybe I've just had lived-in experience. I want Aboriginal youth across Australia, who are the future leaders of our communities here in Australia, to have the same type of opportunities that I've had. And believe me, my social circumstances were just non-existent when I think back at certain times of my life. So it's not about social circumstances. It's about embracing our youth, making sure we have a plan forward. And that's ultimately here. That's why I do this each year, and I will continue to do it and come up with other brainwave things soon. So just, watch this space. Thank you. I have gone way over my time again, as I usually do. So I just want to thank you. I've got the long walk back to my seat here. So.
We can never go over time with this work. Thank you, Michael, and to the whole Message Stick team for bringing us together. The Australian wildflowers on your table should go home with some of you. Like the music today, we thank Nadi and the choir, the ensemble. We thank every speaker. We thank the Stolen Generation members who carry on the truth-telling and the inspiring speeches that give us hope and point us down that road to a brighter, to a brand new day. So take those flowers, please, some of you. It's a reminder of the beauty of this land, this unique land that holds us all. Stay well, stay safe, and most of all, stay strong. Thank you.